Good morning, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Kaya, and I am coming to you live from the Aquarium of the Pacific. And this morning, we are going to be talking about a very unique topic. We're going to be talking all about life cycles of our animals. Do you know what that means? Do you have any questions about life cycles? Well, by the end of this program, I hope you're going to have a super strong understanding of life cycles. Now, while you're watching, if you have any questions, please feel free to text in. I would love to hear from you. You can text in at 562-286-1838. Maybe there's an animal that you'd really like to learn about or that you'd like to see when they're babies. So if so, please feel free to text in. You can also text in to say hi to my friend Allie, who is in the studio with me. She's waving hi to all of you. She is going to be making all of the magic happen behind me and would love to see how you're doing this morning. All right, so my friends, let's go ahead and get started thinking about life cycles. What does that mean? So life cycles are different stages of life as an animal is growing up. So we have a life cycle too, but some animals have very different stages of life. To get us thinking about this though, I'd like to start with maybe some more familiar animals to see if you recognize them while they're babies. And then we'll move on to some animals that might be a little bit harder to recognize. All right, Allie, can you go ahead and surprise me with our first baby animal to talk about? Besides, who doesn't like starting the morning off looking at baby animals? Everybody does, right? While we're waking. Oh my goodness. Oh, let me get out of the way so you can see this adorable little baby. Now, explorers, do you recognize what kind of animal this is? Let's make some quick observations and see if we can figure it out. So I'm noticing we have a beak right here. What kind of animals have beaks? Do mammals have beaks? Do fish have beaks? Some. Allie's reminding me that some have beaks. So is this a fish, my friends, though? Allie, what do you think? No, it's out. It's what?
Too fluffy.
Too fluffy, which brings us to our next point. It looks really, really fluffy. Now, my friends, this might look like fur, which is what baby mammals have, but this is a baby bird. This is a baby penguin, everyone. Did you guess that? Now, when baby penguins are born, they are covered in a type of feather called down feathers, which are very fine feathers, and this helps the bird stay warm. So even though it looks like fur, it's actually not. If we were to zoom in really, really, really close, we could see that they look like teeny tiny little feathers. But my friends, does this look like an adult penguin? Is this what you think of when you think of what a penguin looks like? No, right? They are all gray and fluffy. So those down feathers help them stay warm. And then the color, that gray color, is something that helps them camouflage into their habitat where they're first born. Now, many penguins, at least that species, that's our Magellanic penguins, they nest on the beach near lots and lots of rocks. And so the habitat surrounding them is also very, very gray. So having those gray down feathers helps them camouflage. Thank you, Miss Allie. So this is what it looks like while when penguins come up onto the beach to breed and to lay their eggs. And yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just like noticing how many. Do you know what it's called when we have a whole group of penguins? I'll give you a hint. What do penguins do when they're on land? Do they walk? Do they jump or skip? Oh, Allie is nodding yes. Well, maybe if you watch Happy Feet, they might do something like that. But no, penguins, they waddle. And that will help you remember what it's called when we look at a whole group of penguins. This is called a waddle of penguins, believe it or not. Okay, so in this group here, there's probably lots of little baby penguins, and they are that gray color to help them blend in. Now, if you remember those feathers, they looked really fluffy. What do you think would happen if they got wet? Do you think that they would be waterproof like that?
No.
No, probably not. So when they're really young, they don't go in the water at all. They are relying on their parents to bring food back from the ocean to feed them while they grow. And then they have the next stage of life where they get their waterproof feathers. Now, to get those feathers, they have to go through a process. They don't just grow exactly. Oh, thank you, Miss Allie. So this is what penguins look like as juveniles or adolescents. And to get these feathers, they go through a process called molting. That's when they lose all of those down feathers and they grow in. Actually, they don't really lose them, do they? They grow in these feathers here. Now, do these feathers look a little different than the fluffy ones? They do, right? So in a couple of different ways. So I'm noticing two distinctions here. So number one, I'm seeing different colors. I'm seeing that they have the dark colors here on their back and the white colors here on their stomach. So they're starting to get that distinctive tuxedo look that we think of when we think of penguins, right? Now, another thing I'm noticing is that they look much, much sleeker. They're not fluffy anymore like the little babies are. So what that means is that these feathers are able to be waterproof so that they can swim in the water without getting all wet or their, skin getting wet, because that would make them really, really cold. So what penguins do is they actually put an oil all over their feathers, which is what gives them that sort of sleek look. And that is what keeps them waterproof. Now, they do have lots and lots and lots of feathers, though, believe it or not. So even though they look really sleek and we can't see all the feathers like we could when they were babies, they actually have about 300 times more feathers than birds that fly. And that is because, again, they spend a lot of time in the water, and it's really important that they're able to stay warm. Now, those adolescent penguins were about 3 months old, but is that what adult penguins look like? No. So they have one more stage of life that they need to reach to get to their adult stage. Oh, and this is a great picture here. So their final stage is them as adults. They have to molt out of their juvenile feathers, and then they get their nice tuxedo feathers in. So we can see that distinctive black feathers on their back. And again, those white feathers here. Okay, and this is, again, one of our Magellanic penguins, which are found in South America. Now, really quickly, before we move on to our next animal exploring different stages of life, I want to talk about why they have these colors, because pretty much all penguins have this pattern. Do you know why? Are they dressed up to go to dinner? Are they always just trying to be very, very fancy? Miss Allie is nodding yes. She thinks that they're always going to go to a party. Well, maybe they're going to penguin parties underwater. But the reason that they have this type of coloration is for camouflage, which is, again, to blend in. So this type of camouflage is what we call counter shading, which means that the dark backs are going to blend in with the depths of the ocean if you're looking down at them swimming. But if you're underneath the penguins and you look up, their white tummies are going to blend in with the lights coming through. And this is why many, many penguins have this type of shading. And actually, it's not only penguins. There's lots of animals in the ocean that have this type of coloration. Can you think of any others? Now remember, if you can, or if there's any other animals that you want to talk about this morning, remember that you can text us, and I would be happy to answer any of your questions. Oh, we have a video of some penguins swimming around. What a great way to start the morning. Thank you, Miss Allie. Let's take a look. Okay, well, while we're pulling that up, let's think about those different animals that have the coloration. I think of sharks. A lot of sharks have that. I think of orcas. I think of stingrays. Oh, what a great video. We can see that they're swimming up at the top. So if we were underneath looking up, we would see the white would blend in with the light there. Meanwhile, their dark backs blend in with the water. Oh, hello, little penguin. They're very curious animals. Oh, we can see that they're using their flippers to swim. So again, we know that penguins don't fly, right? But when we're watching them underwater, it kind of looks like they're flying underwater. There it goes, flapping its little wings and using them to swim around. Now, I know that we have to move on to other animals, but there's one other really cute video of penguins I'd like to show you because even as adults, penguins are really playful animals. Now, does anybody out there like to play with bubbles, my friends? I know I do sometimes. Or actually, my cat really loves bubbles. So when I blow bubbles, he loves to chase them, even though he's a grown-up cat. Guess what? Our penguins like to play with bubbles too. Did you know that? Have you ever seen a penguin play with bubbles? Well, take a look, because this is one of their favorite things. Oh, we can see they're chasing them, trying to stomp them out. Up all the way into the water. So even as adults, we like to make sure that our penguins are having fun. This is what we call enrichment, which we try to do for all of our animals. It stimulates their minds and it gives them a good experience in their homes. Okay, so those are what penguins look like as babies, and that's their life cycle. Those are their different stages of life. So they have those three. They have the baby, the juvenile, and then the adult. Miss Allie, are there any other baby animals that we can take a look at? Sure. I'm going to let her surprise me. What animal do you think it's going to be? Oh my goodness, look at this little baby. It's so cute. And it's hard to tell in this picture, but this is actually a very teeny tiny baby, much, much smaller than the penguins that we were looking at. Now, my friends, do you know what kind of animal this is? Do you recognize what animal it's going to grow into? Let's see if we can make some observations here and see if we can try to figure this out. Now, the first thing I notice is its mouth right there, right? That's a really long mouth, okay? Do you know an animal that has a long snout and mouth like that? I'm also noticing some really big eyes right here. And then the other very interesting thing about this baby is the shape of the body. It's really, really long. Now, my friends, if you are thinking, this looks a lot like a seahorse, Miss Kaya, you're on the right track. This is a very close relative of a seahorse, and this is a baby seahorse. And we can see that it has that very similar shape, and it's using its tail here to hold on to a piece of grass. And again, this is a very teeny tiny baby. It's like this big in reality. And when they're born, they're even smaller. They're like this big. You can barely see them. But let's go back to that other baby and see what else is on it, because I'm noticing it has what looks almost like a hat or a crown coming out of its head, and it has what looks a little bit more like leaves on its body. So this, my friends, is a very close relative called a sea dragon, and this is what they grow up to be. So we can see all of their appendages look like leaves. Now, when they start out as babies, they only have teeny tiny ones. And then they have to grow all of these much, much larger ones. And do you understand why they're called leafy sea dragons? Yep, you do. So this is what helps them blend into their habitat or environment. Now, if we were to look at this adult here, would we say this is a very fast swimmer? What do you think? You think it can swim really quickly away from a predator? Allie doesn't think so. No, so these different appendages help them blend in or camouflage instead of swimming away. So that's what they need to rely on. So even as teeny tiny babies, they still have the beginnings of these different appendages. Now, seahorses are a little different because they actually use their tails to hold on to the grass. Now, it looks like we're getting some questions in. What was that? Oh, we have some penguin questions. Well, I love talking about penguins. Let's go on back. Maybe we can take a look at our penguin habitat while we get those questions ready to answer.
So Mr. Mingus' class is wondering, why do penguins
Okay, we got lots of questions about penguins, and Miss Allie just read those off to me. I was just listening to them, and I might need her to help me out with remembering all of them. But those are some great questions. Thank you, Miss Dominguez's class, for tuning in and asking some questions about penguins this morning. So I'm sorry, Allie, can you remind me of the first one? Why do they waddle? What a great question. And what a great view here. So this is our live webcam taking a look at our penguin habitat. So whenever you are curious about what our penguins are doing, you can tune in. And I'm glad that we have this penguin right here on the beach. We can see this penguin actually jump. Perfect! We just got to watch a very fast waddle into the water. See, you never know what's going to happen when you turn this on. Oh, looks like we have they might be feeding time in here. They might have been very excited about their food. All right, so the reason they waddle is because of the structure of their legs. So to think about this, why don't you guys move your own legs up and down, bend your knees. Now, when you think of penguins, it might look like they don't have knees at all, right? They do have knees. They're just all the way up in their body, which is covered with fat and all of those feathers. So they don't bend them like we do. They don't need to, because on land, they really don't need to be that fast. So if you look at this picture, they do have knees. They're just all the way up in here, and we can't really see them, and they don't use them, again, in the same way that we do. They just have their little feet here to help them move around on land, and that is why they waddle. And then when they're in the water, they are much, much more graceful. There is actually one other way that they can move on land if they are living in an icy or snowy environment, and that is called tobogganing, I want to say, which is when they get on their stomachs and then they go whoosh down the ice, because that is a lot faster than having to waddle somewhere. So great question. It's something that lots of people wonder about, and that is why. All right, and I think the next question was how many hours a day they spend in the water. So what's interesting about this, and this is a really great question because it brings up some of the other aspects of penguins' lifestyles, is they have different seasons. So during their breeding season, they don't really spend very much time in the water at all. They would just go in the water to catch their food, and then they would go back on land to spend time with their mates, protect their nest, and, bond like that. But after that, they go through what we call the catastrophic molt. And that is when they molt out of their coat of feathers for a brand new coat. And while they're going through this process, they don't go into the water at all because they don't have waterproof feathers. And so they wouldn't be able to stay warm in the water. So they actually eat a ton of food before this stage so that they're really nice and comfortable and they don't have to go into the water to eat. And after that, after they get that nice new coat, and this is where our penguins are right now, they've all just molted, they go into their migration season. And this is when they spend pretty much all of their time. In fact, they do spend all of their time in the water. So our penguins here, even though they're not really migrating, they still spend all of their time for these few months swimming together in the water just like this. Now, something that you might notice, that's a great image right there, is we just saw, did you guys see those bubbles coming off of their feathers? Did you notice that? And that's happening there too. So this is another way that they stay warm, is they insulate themselves with a layer of air, and that comes out while they're swimming around underwater. So during this stage of their life, they're spending all their time in the water. So hours and hours and hours. All right, and then I think we had... What do they eat? What do you think they eat? What is in the water that they could catch? Is there pizza underwater? No, I don't think so. So these penguins love to eat fish. And they'll also eat squid and things like shrimp or krill as well. So anything small that they can catch that swims around. And penguins have a very interesting mouth that allows them to catch and swallow this fish, because while they're underwater, they don't chew their food. You might have noticed those beaks on the baby penguins. Oh, this is scary. Perfect for Halloween season, right? Did you think that this is what it would look like inside of a penguin's mouth? I know. So these little spiky things that we see here, those are called papillae, which is just a fancy word for, I don't know how to describe it exactly. Like kind of like spikes, but they're not too harsh. Anyways, what that helps them do is it helps them keep the fish inside. So the fish might actually be trying to swim out and they're able to swallow them whole, believe it or not. Now, as far as how long they live, they do live a little longer here at the aquarium because we are providing such good care for them. We feed them, we give them regular checkups, and they don't have any predators here. So I want to say they live up to 30 years, and I'm getting a confirmation from Allie. So here's another look at our Magellanic penguins about to crowd around and get some nice food, which we hand feed them, believe it or not. Now, in the wild, they're not so lucky, but here they get that great care, and you can see they're all very excited for their breakfast, just like I'm sure all of you were as well. Thank you for those questions. I hope you continue to send those in. Okay, so we have talked now about penguins, and we've talked about our sea dragons. Maybe let's take a look at an animal, one more animal, and see if we can figure out what type of animal this is. Okay, we've been, this one, oh, this one's a hard one. Okay, well, I've got some smart explorers. Whoa, Allie, I didn't know you were going to put this up. Yeah. Okay, scientists, we're going to have to, do you recognize this? What kind of animal might this be, and what stage of its life? All right, well, scientists, let's go ahead and be observers. Let's use our skills of observation to see if we can figure it out. So the first thing that I'm noticing, and if you have any guesses as to what animal this might be, please text in. Let's see if we can all figure it out together. Again, that number is 562-286-1838. So I'm noticing that there seems to be two different parts of this animal, two sort of distinctive features. The first one I'm seeing is right here. It looks almost like a little cup, or a bell, maybe. Do you guys see that? We see a whole bunch of them. And then there's something coming off of that, and those look like noodles, right? Lots of stringy spaghetti noodles, which could also be tentacles. Okay, can you think of an animal that has a rounded body and tentacles coming off of it? What do you think? This, my friends, is one of the stages of life of a sea jelly or a jellyfish. Did you know that they looked like that sometimes? That's right. So jellies, and this might be the more familiar stage of a jelly, right? We recognize what that is. Now let me step out of the way because this is the whole life cycle of a jelly. So unlike penguins or sea dragons or us, they don't look the same their entire life. They go through several transformations, and I'm going to go through each of those stages here. So this, again, is their adult stage. And they're what we call spawners. So they spawn to breed. And then this right here is the female. And she holds on to those eggs once they are fertilized. We call this brooding. So we can see here she is holding on to those eggs, which she then releases. So that right there is a jelly, little tiny baby jelly egg. Now the next stage, once they hatch, is right here. This is what we call a polyp. So it starts out like this. And in this image, this is just a diagram. We can't really see where in the ocean they would be, but they are not floating around like adult jellies would be. Instead, they're actually on the ground, kind of like, one of their relatives, the sea anemone. So while they are polyps on the ocean floor, they're growing, okay? So this is different stages of those polyps changing over time. And then they reach the next stage, and that's right here. And this is what we call a strobola. I know, what a fancy word. And that is the stage that we are seeing here. So right in the middle of their life cycle. So we can see here they are all holding on to a hard surface, and we can see all of their tentacles are starting to develop and grow. Now, what's super cool about this stage and jelly's life cycles in general is that they actually clone themselves in this phase. So that's what we see here. All of those are tiny little baby, or what will eventually be jellies. They're all sort of stacked up on top of each other, like we have a nice little jelly tower here. So they actually have two ways of reproducing or making more jellies. So they both sexually produce, which is what we see in the spawning stage, and this is considered asexual reproduction or cloning. Okay, so let's go back to that strobula picture one more time, just because it's such a cool picture. So we can maybe even start to see if we look very carefully, there might be some different jellies there. So after this stage, those little jellies will start to pop off their stack of jellies, the strobula. And that's what this is right here. Now, is that starting to look like a baby jelly to you? Can you kind of see those tentacles there, and then what eventually is going to become the body or the bell? And let's take a look at a real one. Oh, look at that! Under a microscope. So this is a teeny, tiny, baby little jelly. And this stage is called an ephyra. I know all of these fancy words for the different stages of a jelly. Now, if I were to look at this and not know anything, I might think this looked like a sea star, right? And it would grow all those arms. But it is not. And that's what's so interesting about life stages, is that it can be unpredictable or surprise you about what they eventually grow into. So at this stage, again, it's called the ephyra, and we can see those are going to become their tentacles here. And also we can see that was see-through, right? So jellies are pretty much see-through their whole lives because they are made up primarily of water. And this is going to be really helpful for them at this stage because they are very, very tiny. So they're considered plankton. They're actually considered plankton their whole lives, and probably also helps them maybe blend in, although nothing can really see them anyway. So maybe not. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at what their next stage is. I think we might have a picture of the ephyra. And what do we see here? We can see the shape of the jelly is starting to form. So we're starting to see those tentacles go down just like that, which is a little bit more recognizable of the adult jelly. We can see the top of what is called the bell starting to form there as well. And both of these, I believe, are considered ephyras, just slightly different stages of the ephyra. And here we go. We can see, again, a microscopic view of a baby jelly or ephyra. And we can see that it is starting to take that recognizable shape of a jelly. Now, let's go ahead and see what this grows into. And by the way, these are our moon jellies, which is not this type of jelly here. These are called our sea nettles, but I'm sure they have a very similar life cycle. And now, what? Yeah, we didn't have moon jelly video, but I wanted to make sure you got a chance to take a look and make some observations of jellies. So we can see that they are starting to pulse they do pulse their bell. So that round part on an adult jelly is called a bell because it looks a whole lot like a bell. And then we can see all of those spaghetti-like things are actually their tentacles. Now, if you look closely, you might notice they actually have two types of spaghetti-like things. So they do have their tentacles, which are the skinny ones along the edge of their bell. But then in the middle there, do you see what those are? Does that look the same? No, they look a lot ruffly. They look like ruffles, right? So those are what we call oral arms. And that's the part of the jelly that they use to get their food to their mouth. So how do they get their food? Well, would you want to touch this jelly, Miss Allie? Would you like to go and put your hand in and give it a big hug? No. Not so much, right? And that's because we know that jellies have stinging cells all along their tentacles. So that's how they catch their food. Now, as plankton, they can't swim around and chase their food. They rely on currents to help food go through them or pass by them. And if they pass by, they might get stung by these stinging cells on their tentacles, and then their oral arms bring the food up into their stomachs. And one of my favorite things about jellies is that they have 4 stomachs, my friends. What would you do if you had 4 stomachs? Because I would eat a lot more food, which is one of my favorite things to do. How about you? All right, my friends, I hope you enjoyed learning all about some of the different life stages of our animals here at the aquarium, and are excited to learn more about them because there are so many different types of life cycles out there. Today, we got to spend some time learning about our penguins. We got to take a look at our sea dragons, and we even spent some time looking at our sea jellies and exploring the very different life stages of a jelly. All right, friends, thank you so much for tuning in to the Aquarium's Online Academy. We will be back on Wednesday for more programming. We even have a Spanish program at 10 a.m. So we hope to see you all there. And until then, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.